Well, today we're cruising the Burg with, I don't even have to say your name, Joe Hart. I just told somebody I was going out with Joe Hart to do Cruising the Burg, and they said, well, he knows everybody in town. It's probably going to go really well, so no pressure.
Probably ask you why.
No. Well, thanks, buddy, for being here.
Oh, you're welcome.
I'm going to be driving over here by Block 22, which I think is where you kind of got your start.
I came from a very small town of Richmond, Kansas, between Garnett and Ottawa, and I was went through a country school. I was the only one in my class for 7.5 years. Talking about this Block 22 is that I have a good connection because I had an office in here with the Northwestern Mutual.
Where was it?
It's on the third floor, right next to the elevator.
How old were you when you started Northwestern?
Oh, I was 24.
Wow.
And I was with them 64 years.
Who kind of got you into that? How'd you?
Well, I interviewed out at Pittsburg State. I selected Pittsburg, Kansas to live in. I've always enjoyed what I've been doing, because it was always meeting people. And I guess that's probably the reason why I got involved in a lot of things, because, if you knew people, it was easier to communicate and get together with them. And most of the people that I've done business with, I'd say probably a good 80% of them, we've become very good friends. And that's kind of unusual. That doesn't happen in a larger community. Yeah, and I came down here to college, and probably the best thing about Pittsburg State is that's where I met my wife, Sally. She was from Pittsburg, Kansas, and that's where I met her. I met her through the Newman Club, the Newman Catholic Center.
Our next. Yeah, that's where we're going next.
Right. It was in the library. I made a bet with her.
You met her by
Yeah.
betting with her. What was the bet?
The bet was over her birthday. My birthday's May the 9th, and she said, well, her dad's birthday was May the 9th, and I said, well, mine's May the 9th too. And she said it is not. She said, I'll bet you a dinner. I said, you're sorry you made that bet. So a couple of days later, we had the date. Okay, like this right here, the Catholic Center on campus, always known as St. Pius X, and I was very active when I was in college here, and was vice president. Went on national conventions, and
This is beautiful.
and it is. And I tell you what, and Father David, he and I were co-chairman of the drive to raise $3 million. And we made it. But no, it's a beautiful place. If you haven't been inside of it, the chapel is outstanding. I had a good friend by the name of Ken Bateman who got me involved in Rotary and a lot of other things. And he was the first, I think, alumni director here. When I was president of the Alumni Association, which was many years ago, Ken Bateman and I, he was the alumni director, and Jack Overman, he was, of course, with the university, and somebody else, and I forget who it was having a meeting. And they were just in the process of talking about buying this piece of property right here. And Jack Overman knew more than the rest of us.
Well, he had the vision, and there it sits, and it's a beautiful building.
Especially.
What do you think about this one? Who's this guy? What's the name on there?
Gene Bicknell. Oh my gosh. Gene Bicknell and I, we go back a long ways together, because I have a picture of him when he and I were in JC's, and he was we would have a fund drive to raise money for the athletic scholarship fund on campus, and he was our chairman. And I got this picture of him where he's handing out cards of people for us to call on. The one thing I've always said about him, he never forgets a name.
I know. It's amazing.
Well, I know it.
We've got a fire station over here. I mean, weren't you involved tangentially in
Well,
some of this fundraising?
we had a bond issue for the fire station, and the library, and also for the swimming pool. I remember I walked in this meeting, and Ed McNally, he was in on it, and so I was sitting there, and somebody said, well, all we need is a chairman. Ed McNally spoke up, and he said, well, why don't we get Joe Hart? So he doesn't do anything anyway.
Were you there?
Oh, yeah, I was there. And you know what? A nice article in regard to, Ron here and his boys in the paper yesterday, I think it was. you know, in regard to the ownership of that store.
They've done a heck of a lot with it.
Yeah, I knew.
I know they've got a few others too, but I mean, it's a pillar in the
Oh
community.
yeah, well, and they've done a beautiful job with it. And I worked with his wife, Barbara Rhodes, on the Community Foundation of Southeast Kansas. I think the thing that really surprised me the most about the Community Foundation is the Southeast Kansas is how it gained so much credibility so quickly.
Very
Well, I
easy
remember
to
Gordon
do.
Elliott saying one time, and he said, "You know what, Joe?" He said, walking out of one of those meetings, he said, "I think this is the best board I've ever served on." Talking about Gordon, you know, I used to pull some tricks on him, you know, and one time at a chamber of coffee, you know, of course he was always dressed neat, and that was when he was still president of National Pizza, and he has this nice looking jacket on, and he's standing there talking to a couple guys, and I knew him real well, and I wouldn't do anything to hurt him, and I walked up to him and I said, "Hey Gordon," I said, "great looking jacket." He said, "Thanks, Joe." And I said, "By the way," I said, "what's the dog sleeping on this morning?" And these other two guys, I didn't know who they were, but they looked at me as if to say, "Hey, who are you to talk to this guy like
This
that?"
is Gordon Elliott.
Well, you know what? And there's a lot of good people in Pittsburgh, you know, and I couldn't have chosen a better town to live in and to raise a family.
So we're heading out to the, you know, kind of the whole golf complex, YMCA, the pool. So was this another one of the Bond?
Yeah.
Bond, was this one the same
Swimming
one?
pool.
Was it a brand new pool? Was it to open it, or was it just to fix it up? How long?
Well, no, it was, gosh,
Tell me about
I think the pool was probably there, but I mean, they just built it, redid it, you know, and made it into what it is today.
it. It's quite an asset now.
Yeah. Well, and like the library, I'm glad I have to say something about the library because, first of all, Bev Clarkson is something else. I've served on that board for about 5 years now, and gosh, the publicity she gets, and which is great, you know, but you have to work for that
Well,
to get that, and she
works.
does, and my gosh, it's fantastic.
She's got,
I would like to, but she deserves so much credit.
you know, we're getting a new mini golf course.
Yeah, and I tell you what, this is going to be a big change too, isn't it?
Yeah, this is going to be so long overdue.
Oh yeah, that's going to be
$400,000 of a state grant and some private money. And
yeah.
it's going to be it's needed. You know, this was in disrepair kind of when I got here, but it's amazing, and we have to have mini golf.
Joe Lee, you know, he worked hard on this, you know, to raise some private dollars.
$180,000 he raised.
Isn't that great?
And it wasn't too long. Now we're just waiting on the grant to get approved, and
Well,
we'll hopefully get it built this year. But
when Steve Scott and I were, co-chair of the United Way campaign a number of years ago, I wondered what kind of role he wanted to play in it. So, because a lot of people, they want to use it just because of their name, and I thought maybe that's what they wanted to use. And so they asked me if I would be the co-chairman with him. And like after the first week of that campaign, one Sunday afternoon, I was at home. I get a phone call about 4 o'clock in the afternoon from the guy is deceased, C.A. Bud Walker. Bud Walker. He was part owner of the Texas Rangers at one time.
Okay.
But Bud Walker called me, and I knew him. I didn't know him socially, but knew him. And he said, "Hey, Joe," he said, "I hear you're heading up the United Way campaign." And he said, "I know they've had problems raising the money in the past." And he said, "I'd like to help you." And he said, "Do you need?" I said, "I'd be willing to give $10,000, $20,000, even up to $50,000 for you to make your goal." So, anyway, we made our goal. So I told him, I said, "Well, we really didn't need any money," but I said, "You know what? One thing, Bud, I just seeing that this current year when they're paying out the funds, they were short $23,000." And I said, "How would you feel about making that up so all these places can get their money?"
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Well, where do I take the check?" In this place right here, the YMCA.
Yeah, so with the Y.
Oh, I mean, I worked on their membership drive probably for 35, 37 years or whatever. I'd play a lot of times I played with this priest, you know, and he was a good athlete. The coaches up at St. Mary's would say, "Who'd you play this morning?" And he said, "Well, I played Joe Hart." And he said, "Did you beat him?" He said, "No, he beat me." And you said, "You're kidding. You let him beat you?" He'd hit the ball and he'd stop and I wouldn't return it. And he said, "Joe, how come you didn't return the ball?" I said, "Because the ball hit the floor before it hit the wall." He said, "What?" I said, "Father," I said, "the ball hit the floor before it hit the wall." And he said, "You're kidding." We said that about 3-4 times. He says to me, he said, "You know what?" He said, "I can't believe you're saying that to a priest." And I said, "Hey, don't pull that stuff on me this morning, Joe." And my wife's dad worked for McNally's, you know, Patterson, and he traveled all over the world for him. He was considered an expert on coal preparation beds.
Okay.
And so he'd travel, you know, all over. They sent him all over the world.
Yeah, this was an international company, right?
Mm-hmm. Going into Rick Webb, I've known him for a long time, you know, and you know his mother probably even better. Kay Lynn, you know, has done a lot of good in this town. In that 908 campaign I was talking about earlier, what she, you know, I talked to Rick and I said, "Rick," I said, "Hey, you know what? I said, I need some help from somebody for your company." I said, "to make our go." And he said, "Hey, have you ever worked with my mother?" And they went from 10,000 that one year, 8,000 one year before, to over 18,000 because of her. So she said, "Joe, give me 2 days.
Made it a priority.
Give me 2 days and I'll have this thing organized." I tell you what, Harvey Dean is a piece of work. In his own right, he and Sharon. My wife hasn't been feeling good, Sally, for a long time, you know, and Harvey would always bring up, you know, for every Sunday for a while, Sunday afternoon, he'd call me and he said, "You guys home?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I'll bring you some strawberries." Well, he'd come and he'd say, "Hey, I picked you some strawberries." Well, he had just come from Costco for, the place over in Joplin, you know, and he said, "I just picked these out of my garden." And I said, "Yeah, I can tell by the grass stains on your knees, you know." Well, another people too I want to mention is Jeff Wilbert. Jeff Wilbert, yeah, everybody knows Jeff Wilbert, you know, and he's done more and doing more for this town. I asked him, I said, "You know what, they ought to really be auditing you because he's the treasurer of so many organizations." Well, I don't know how he keeps this straight.
But he does a great job.
But I tell you what, you know, when a year ago when I fell and hurt myself, people came with, and you know, and Lori Sponchek, the State Farm agent, she came out the hospital, and nice gal, and I've just known her through the chamber, and she brought me a bouquet of roses. And then probably about a couple of weeks after that, after getting out of the hospital, here she comes with because we were talking about when she was there visiting me, lasagna. She comes and brings a pan of lasagna. And so then what happens, I was telling a guy about it, you know, Kip Bollinger, you know, at Gitman's insurance agency. So one Saturday morning, here the doorbell rings. I go to the door, and it's him, and it's Kip, and Kip has a big pot of flowers for me.
Right.
And then he has a big pan of homemade lasagna, and he brings it in and he said, "You know, no way am I going to let another insurance agent here in town outdo me, you know."
You're a joy, you're a treasure. And I told people we were going to get together. They were excited and they thought, you know, he's going to have a lot of stories, and you have, but I just want to tell you, thanks for being my friend, and thanks for being an honest businessman and setting the bar up for the rest of them, and thanks for getting into this car and driving around and sharing some of your stories.
Thank you. Your biggest criticism may be that you asked me to go